Hello, welcome to the RBH webinar. We're glad everybody could join us today. Today we have Maggie Belay. Maggie is a LPC here in Portland, Oregon. She's one of RBH's clinical managers. She's worked for other EAPs for at least 20 plus years. And we're very glad to have her here and take advantage of some of her expertise on domestic violence today. Maggie, take it away.
Thank you, Russ.
Yep.
So thank you all for being here. This is a difficult topic, but we'll get through it. I want to look at our agenda first. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at why is this an important issue? Why is this a workplace issue? You know, most people don't think of domestic violence as a workplace issue. We're going to look at the definition of domestic violence. Who is abused? Why don't they just leave? That's a question that people ask over and over again. What does domestic violence look like in the workplace? And what can HR managers and supervisors do in the workplace when they're confronted with this? So as you can see, this is a full agenda. We have some polling questions, and hopefully at the end we'll have some time for questions. So let's first look at why is this an important issue. You know, domestic violence is a serious problem and a national health concern. It occurs more frequently than most people realize, and it has significant negative impact on individuals and communities. Domestic violence has been in the media a lot lately with sports figures, but sports figures are not the only people who abuse. And as we'll talk later, we'll talk more about who are the people that abuse. So let's look at some of the statistics that we have with domestic violence. Right now, what we know, it is a primary cause of injury to women in the United States. Over 1/3, exactly 37% of women admitted to an emergency room are of violence-related injuries or abused by an intimate partner. 1 in 3 women in the United States are physically abused by a partner at some point in their life. In addition to the emotional toll on families, the total cost to the U.S. economy exceeds $8 billion a year, which includes $727.8 million for lost productivity, or nearly 8 million paid workdays each year. So you can see this is quite large. I also want to point out that 1/3 of all women murdered in the United States are killed by their partners. So we're talking about some pretty significant statistics. But why is this an important issue for the workplace? Okay. You know, domestic violence doesn't just stay at home. We used to think that this was something that people only talked about in their home. It was a secret. But what we know now is that 21% of full-time employees report being victims of domestic violence. Victims of domestic violence are stalked, they're harassed, and they are assaulted at work. They seek help and support from their coworkers and supervisors. Abuse can have an impact on their work and in the functioning of the work site. 64% of people who are abused say their work performance was severely impacted. Also, abusers take company time to use company equipment to stalk or harass. And coworkers can also be concerned about their own safety. What if the abuser comes to the work site? What impact does that have on them? So I want to take a look at a short scenario of what may occur in the workplace. Okay? Ruth asked to talk with her supervisor in private. Ruth tells the supervisor that she had to call the police last night to arrest her live-in boyfriend. She explains that she was talking on the phone with her mother when her boyfriend suddenly yanked the phone from her hand and pulled the cord out of the wall. Then he slapped and punched her several times, giving her a black eye. He is in jail today, but she is not sure for how long. She says this has happened before, but he always apologizes and is so sorry she has always taken him back. This time, however, Ruth says she is planning to get an order of protection and that she is planning to stay with family members for a while. So we're going to look at our first polling question. So the first polling question is there a threat of violence in Ruth's workplace? Okay. So should we give it a few minutes?
Yeah, about 92% said yes.
That's a great response, because there are a number of things to look for here. You know, it could have been possibly no, but the more realistic thing, I always believe, is to err on the side of being conservative, which would suggest, yes, there is possibly a risk of violence in the workplace. And what would be incumbent on the supervisor in this situation is to really ask a few more questions. For example, he might ask Ruth, has her boyfriend ever threatened to come to the workplace? And since Ruth will be staying with family members, her boyfriend might try to find her at the work site, in which case the supervisor might ask Ruth to include the work site in her order of protection. We're going to talk a little bit more later on in this program about employees' responsibilities. But the main thing in here is that the supervisor really has an obligation to protect Ruth once she has given him the information. Okay? What we know is some abusive partners may try to stop women from coming to work by calling them frequently during the day or by coming to their workplace unannounced. Research at this point suggests that 50% are harassed at work. So what is domestic violence? Domestic violence, I'm sure as most of you know, is an ongoing pattern in which one person attempts to control their partner. Behaviors include intimidation, threats, psychological confusion, emotional pain, verbal abuse, physical attacks, sexual assault, and homicide. Abusive behaviors also include periods of apology, and this is what makes it so confusing for the person that's in that relationship. There is blaming, little or no communication, lots of promises to change after an abusive episode. And by changing behaviors, the abuser is constantly keeping their partner off guard and in fear. Domestic violence is illegal at this point. Domestic violence is cyclical. We're going to talk more about that cycle of abuse later. What you need to know, even though every domestic violence situation is different, the one thing that they all have in common is abusers want power and control. Many abusers go between using violence and feeling sorry, as we've said before. They can be charming, sweet, and apologetic 1 minute, and then abusive. So who is abused? You know, domestic violence doesn't discriminate. All kinds of people are abused. It occurs between all ethnic groups and all cultures, among all ages, all income levels. That's really important to understand because we used to have a stereotype that this only happened in lower class income levels, but professionals can be abusive as well. All faiths and all educational levels. Women are more likely to be abused than men, but men can also be victims. I have had male clients that have been abused by their spouses, and this is particularly hard for a male to come in and talk about being abused by their spouse because we don't have that picture in our heads. Abuse can occur in both heterosexual and same-sex relationships. So we have lots of polling questions today, so I have another polling question for you. What percentage of men in the U.S. have experienced physical violence by an intimate partner? Less than 5%, less than 15%, more than 25%, more than 35%. So what does it look like, Joe, at this point?
So the biggest category would say about half said probably more than 25%, and then about a third said less than 15%. That's the biggest two.
Okay. So those of you that answered more than 25% are correct. What in recent research, more than 1 in 4 men have experienced physical violence in an intimate relationship. This, of course, includes heterosexual or homosexual relationships. And this figure may not be totally accurate, as many men are hesitant to admit that they have been abused. Okay? So who are the abusers? Just as victims of violence come from all parts of the population, those who abuse intimate partners can be of any age, sex, race, or educational level. Abusers can be rich, poor, unemployed, employed, and work in any occupation. 86% of abusers are white. 37%, over 1/3, had some college. 80%, which is the majority, are employed. 57%, over half, are between the ages of 18 and 34. So pretty young. So who abuses? You know, abusers abuse people they feel they can control. The purpose of domestic violence is for the abuser to get or maintain control over his partner or ex-partner. Abusers use domestic violence because it gets to them what they want. You know, and we're going to talk about later, really, that abusers don't start out abusing. It is a slow process. If I were to meet someone and they were immediately abusive, I probably wouldn't stick around. But that isn't the case. Most abusers can be very charming in the beginning, and it's a very insidious process. It happens very slowly. Domestic violence usually increases as there are children in the family. So the next one is we're looking at why in the world doesn't she just leave? That's a question that people ask over and over again. So there are a multitude of reasons why someone wouldn't leave. She may be afraid to leave, or he may be afraid to leave. The batterer will kill her if she leaves. And usually I'm using the feminine pronoun because the majority of people that are abused are female. Okay? Violence often increases when the victim does leave. The abuser may threaten suicide, and you need to remember that the person in this abusive relationship does love the abuser, and they don't want them to hurt themselves. She is frightened she will lose her children. That's a huge threat that abusers make, that they will take the children. And also there may be a lack of resources. She may not have the money to live on her own. And the thing we need to remember when we deal with domestic violence is no one wants to be hurt. No one wants to be abused. And as I said a few minutes ago, most abusers start out being very charming. You know, I've had so many women tell me he was a Prince Charming. So we don't start out being abusing. And what happens is it is a slow process where I might get insulted, then I might get slapped. But every once in a while, the person that was so nice to me in the beginning is there again. And what happens is I keep hoping that if I just hit on the right behavior, if I do the right thing, then that person will come back to me, the one that was so good in the beginning. So what might happen if the abused person leaves? Well, leaving is different for everyone. Some abusers increase the level of violence, holding the victim or children hostage, making repeated unwanted phone calls or visits threatening to harm the victim or the victim's family or friends. Remember, the main issue with domestic violence is control. And if you leave me, I have lost control. A lot of people who are abused leave for the short term and then they return. It actually is 7 times, an average of 7 times, that someone in a domestic violence relationship leaves and returns and then hopefully leaves for good. Other victims may attempt to leave and face an increased level of violence or even death. Victims use a variety of strategies to be safer when they leave, such as restraining orders, shelters, community resources, etc. But what we all know is restraining orders get broken all the time. Many abused people do seek help, but their complaints may be ignored, minimized, or dismissed, including the police often get tired of being called to domestic violence situations. The thing that I want to point out is that over 70% are injured after the separation. So it's important to respect that the person in the abused relationship really knows her situation the best. So what does domestic violence look like in the workplace? And it's important to note we're looking for a pattern of signs and symptoms, not just one single thing, okay? Just as you in human resources or managers or supervisors, when you are looking at performance issues with the people that work for you, you're looking for a pattern of behavior. You're not just acting on one thing. So some of the things that you may see in the workplace are arriving to work late or very early, unplanned or increased use of earned time off or paid time off, decreased productivity. You might ask, why decreased productivity? Because I might be very distracted. I may be worried all the time of what's going to happen next. Tension around receiving repeated phone calls at work, which can be really disruptive to my ability to work. I can have difficulty concentrating on tasks. Remember, as the longer I stay in an abusive relationship, the more my self-esteem and my sense of self-confidence gets worn down. I might have difficulty concentrating on tasks. I might receive flowers or gifts for no apparent reason. I may have vague, non-specific medical complaints. There may be signs of fear, anxiety, depression, fatigue, and also intense startle reaction. There may be a multitude of other things that you could see, including perhaps bruises, but remember, you're just looking for a pattern. So what I'd like to do is, we've looked at what domestic violence looks for the person in the abused relationship in the workplace. I want to look at the other side of what does the abuser look like in the workplace. So how is the workplace affected by the abuser? So our next polling question is, how is the workplace affected by the one who does the abusing? Number one, they can be late for work because of reasons related to the violence. They can use work time and resources to contact their partner to express remorse, anger, check up on them, pressure them, or threaten them. Abusers take time off from work for reasons related to the violence, or last, all of the above.
I think it's pretty unanimous. Most people are saying it's all the above.
You guys are really good. It is all of the above. A study of men enrolled in an intervention program for domestic violence indicated that 29% said they had contacted their partner while at work to either scare or intimidate them. 31% stated they had taken paid time off to be abusive or deal with the aftermath of the incident. 25% left or were late to work due to the abuse of their partner. In another study, 78% used workplace resources to express remorse or anger, check up or pressure or threaten their partner. 74% stated they had easy access to their partner's workplace, with 21% stating they contacted their partner at work in violation of a no-contact order. 48% of them said they had difficulty concentrating at work. 19% reported having an accident or a near miss because they were distracted. And 42% overall said they were late for work. So huge impact on the workplace. So what we're going to look at now is what employers can do in the workplace. Okay. One of the very basic things that employers can do is get posters, brochures, a list of community resources to have around the work site for people. And at the end of this presentation, I do have resources for you that you can download and post at work. Okay? It's important to notice what is happening, and if appropriate, talk to your employee in a supportive and non-judgmental way. Again, you're looking for a pattern of behavior, and if you see something, you want to address it. So how would I address abuse? I express concern. I show support. If he or she tells you that they're being abused, you want to make sure to really let them know that abuse is not their fault. It's important to ask open-ended questions. Assure him or her that you won't talk to others about what you've been told, so you won't put their safety at risk. Okay? And by open-ended questions, it's really more, how can I help you? What do you need? You don't want to be giving advice at this point. So here are some ideas of what you might say to employees that you are worried about. You might just go up to them as you would anyone else that you think is having a problem. Is everything okay? I'm worried about you. If you want to talk, I'm here to listen. Sometimes I worry that someone might be hurting you. I just want to remind you about the EAP. Remember, no one deserves to be hurt by anyone else. So this is the last of our polling questions, okay? How many of you have suspected that someone is being abused in your workplace and have been hesitant to approach them?
So it's right around a third that said yes, they have suspected, they've been afraid to approach about it.
Okay. It's a difficult thing to do because we don't want to be wrong, we don't want to insult somebody. But remember, we're not accusing someone, particularly if we just go up to them and really talk about, I'm worried, is everything okay? You know, it's the same thing I tell supervisors and HR people when they suspect that someone is depressed. You might just go up to them and remind them about the EAP as a resource, that this is there for you, and we hope you utilize it. So when you're talking to someone, if they tell you that they are being abused, it's important to do the following. You want to just listen. Listening can be one of the best ways to help. People need to talk and they need to be heard. Extremely important that the person knows that it's going to be kept confidential. Don't tell other people that she told you. If there is a direct threat of violence at work, you want to keep that confidential, but you want to let, if you are a manager or supervisor, you certainly want to let HR know so they can take appropriate action. You want to provide information, not advice. Extremely important to be careful about giving advice. The person in the situation knows their situation best, okay? So you really need to encourage them to make their own decisions. And the other reason not to give advice is this person in an abusive relationship is being told what to do, how to act, what to say all the time. So what they really need is not to be told what to do. And also to be patient. You know, many of us, including myself, get impatient with people in domestic violence relationships because we just want them to not be hurt. We want them to be able to leave and be safe, okay? But you have to remember that coping with abuse takes time. Remember, I said the average number of times that a person leaves is 7 times, okay? And it's important that we just let the person know we're going to be there, that we're not going to judge them, that we're not going to fix it. And also, as I said over and over again, it's important to tell the person it's not their fault, that no one deserves to be hurt, and to help them get the resources they need. So if you are an employer, there are a number of things you can do to make your workplace safer for victims of domestic violence and to make sure you meet state and federal requirements for a safe workplace. The very first thing that a person in a domestic violence needs to feel, they need to feel safe because they never feel safe. So we need to help them feel safe at work. So some of the things we need to look at are, can non-employees physically enter the workplace without presenting identification or interacting with some kind of security? It might be just that you have locking doors that people cannot enter without phoning in first. Are employees' work schedules, home and work phone numbers, and address easily accessible, or are they not accessible to anyone except those who work in the workplace? Does the parking lot or path to the nearest public transportation have adequate lighting? Or can someone escort this person to the parking lot? And if someone works off-site, are there places where they are isolated or alone for long periods of time, and can that be corrected? Are there safety issues particular to workers who have work responsibilities outside the formal workplace? And also looking at what the workplace can do is it's important to develop policies and procedures that guide your response to domestic violence. This can be written by a management team or a team of managers and employees, and you can always use your EAP for consultation, or you can use domestic violence resources in your community for consultation. And I think it's important that all employees go through a domestic violence training so they know what to do. It's important to learn about the domestic violence resources in your community. I think that once an employee comes to you and talks about that they're in a domestic violence situation, it might be important to be able to flex their time if necessary, give them time to go off-site for any domestic violence-related needs, work with management staff to write new and changing existing workplace policies, and be flexible about their time off during the day so it doesn't arouse suspicion at home. We can refer employees to needed resources. Make sure you know the right resources, and we can help you with that here at the EAP. Increase the safety in your workplace. Make sure your workplace has an organized response to direct threats of domestic violence. If there's no policy, plan a process to respond. And as I said before, educate your employees about domestic violence. It's important that employees know that if they hear of any direct threat, they need to inform HR. Employees need to know they can go to internal security resources or use procedures you have developed, such as threat assessment, that respond to workplace violence. Employees and employers should be trained in domestic violence response and workplace policies, which, by the way, you're doing now. So what do you say to an employee who abuses? Because remember, abusers also work. So if a coworker tells you that he has been violent at home, it's extremely important to be very clear with that person that it is not okay to be violent. Here are some suggestions, okay, of what you can say. No matter what the situation is, there are always ways to handle things without being violent. If taking time out doesn't work, you can always, if taking time out doesn't work, you can always leave for a while. I know you believe she started it, but you choose the way to act the way you do. No one can make you violent or abusive. It is a choice you make. Never approve of the abuser's behavior or laugh with that person if they try to make a joke about hurting someone. If employees see a coworker using company phones, faxes, or email to stalk or threaten someone, they need to report this immediately to their manager, their supervisor, or to HR. If an employee you see someone harassing or abusing someone else in the workplace, it's important to report it right away as well. And employers should be prepared to discipline someone who is using the workplace for abuse. And it's important to make it clear that it is a crime to abuse your partner. So in terms of how employers can help, here are a couple more ideas. Can someone walk with the employee to the car or to the transit stop? Are there any carpools that this employee can go with? Can phone calls be screened? Can the employee's phone number be changed? Can caller ID be installed in the employee's work unit? Remember, one of the ways the abuser constantly keeps this person off balance is by repeated phone calls and checking up on them. Can the employee's name and number be removed from automated phone messages or directories? And also extremely important, not to give out any personal information to others. Abusers have excellent skills in obtaining information from coworkers. In continuation of how employers can help, make sure all employees know the specifics of your policy, how to report any incident. Does the policy cover threats over the telephone? Does it cover non-employees as well as employees? Is there a specific telephone number to call? If needed, get a network, the employee's work assignments or schedule, follow up to see how the employee is doing with the new arrangement that you've changed. Any general questions such as, how are you doing, how are things going, are extremely important to keep checking in with that person. Respect the employee's privacy, even if you think she's still in an abusive relationship. Maintain your relationship as a manager, not as the counselor. And as I said before, to avoid arousing an abuser's suspicion, an employee may want to seek help during the workday. So if possible, try to schedule that they can take time off during the day. This is a resource that you can log on to on the internet that will tell you what each state has for domestic violence leave laws. It's a www.legalmomentum.org. Okay. Lastly, I just want to, I'm not going to talk about these, but I want to let you know that these resources are available for you to download, to post at your work site if you want. Am I being abused? And it goes through a list of what it is to be in an abusive relationship. Am I an abuser? And again, a list of things that make someone an abuser. This is what we commonly refer to as the cycle of violence, the wheel of violence. What does it look like? What does power and control look like? And if you want some of these to post on the work site, we can definitely get you a larger copy. Okay? There's also a wheel of what it's like to be in a relationship that's nonviolent. Okay, I think that's it. So we have some time for questions or comments if you wish.
So there were a couple of questions people asked already. Go ahead and type a few more if you'd like, but I'll sort of paraphrase some of the overlapping ones that we had. So first of all, Maggie, besides just partners that might be abusers, what else have you seen as far as family members or other people in the victims' lives might be abusing them, and how does that look differently when it's not a partner?
Abuse is abuse, and older children can abuse parents. We know a lot about elder abuse now. This doesn't occur so much in the workplace, but it's just not partners that get abused. Adolescents can abuse parents. Adults can abuse parents that they're taking care of.
And in your experience, from the abuser's perspective, is this like something they've always had, like a personality trait, or is this something that might happen to them later in life? Or?
In my experience in working with mostly men that are abusive, is they are often raised in homes where they have been abused or have witnessed abuse. And also my experience with abusive males is what really is at the core of this is fear and lack of self-esteem. The only reason I need to control someone else is because I am afraid. Anything else?
Yeah, a couple others. This training was mainly directed at HR representatives and supervisors and things like that. But as far as who's best suited to handle issues like this at work, would you say it is HR people that should be made aware of this?
Yes, and I also think that it's really incumbent on companies to have a domestic violence presentation for all their employees so that all employees know what to do. If I am sitting next to someone that I think is abusive and threatening their partner, I want to know that I can go to HR and report that. And we're happy to help you set that up in your work site.
And we will also be posting this webinar to our YouTube channel soon after our presentation today, if not later this afternoon, then probably sometime tomorrow. So if you're wanting to get a recap of this, that's certainly going to be available as well.
Anything else?
Somebody mentioned there might be a typo on the slide. If that is the case, we'll make sure we get that fixed.
I saw that when we were going through. Thank you.
We'll make sure we get that corrected and posted somewhere as well. Hopefully it should be apparent where you need to go, though. I think those were all the questions we have at this point.
Okay, thank you very much for coming. And remember, you can always consult us at the EAP is there for you.
Thank you, Maggie, and just a reminder to check our website for upcoming webinars. We're still trying to do this once a month, usually on a Wednesday at noon. So hope you can join us again in the future. Thanks.